Psalm 139:13 through 14. For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well.
That's me, right there, the one that looks like Mr. Magoo. I always heard that as a baby, that I looked like Mr. Magoo, and not until I saw the cartoon did I realize, yeah, I really did look like Mr. Magoo, and yet Mom and Dad picked me anyway. So as so often happens, my mom and dad were told that they could not have children on their own. And so they began to investigate adoption and came through deaconess pregnancy and adoption. And 50 years ago this summer, they came to the window and they chose me. Now, that's not exactly what happened, but that's the story that I like to tell. It goes along with my testimony. And that is that God looks down on each one of us and he says, I choose you. As a teenager, I began to have some pain with being adopted, and just that feeling of being abandoned, a feeling of not knowing from where I came, not understanding why I had green eyes or sandy blonde hair. I had a lot of people in my life that really fed into me and encouraged me, but particularly my youth pastor, who reminded me that I was knit together in my mother's womb by my father. I still wanted to know and still wanted to get answers at some point, but it did help to know that I was a child of God and that I was adopted by him, much like I was adopted by my parents. And I became a young adult, 16, 17. My interest in meeting my birth mother continued to rise. And so I began to search for her, although at the time it was kind of a pointless search, as I didn't have many resources. I didn't have many answers. In my early 30s, I kind of had a breakthrough, and through an open seal of my adoption records because of a health issue, I was able to get some information that later led me to my birth mother. And in 2003, we had an incredible reunion. And in meeting her and her husband and her son, was able to get some of those questions, those long life questions answered. Begin to understand why I had such a love for music and for theater. As we met that day and began to get to know each other, I saw years of hurt and questions begin to disappear. I was able to see and meet an amazing woman. Sharon had decided to come to Deaconess and live there and give birth to me. I realize that in 1969, she had choices to make. She had other alternatives. And as a teenager, that really began to hit me hard, knowing that I could have never have been. And yet she made a choice to go to Deaconess and place me up for adoption. A very courageous choice on her part, one that I am so grateful for. As I've talked about, I'm so thankful for my adoptive family, Mom and Dad. And yet, when I would talk about doing a search for my biological family, the room would get very tense. And the night that I came over to their house to say, I found her, it was a very difficult night. My mom began to experience the fear that she had 50 years ago as she held this newborn boy and worried that someone would come and take him from her. And so what I had to do was just begin to assure them that I was still their son. Although a grown adult with my own family, they were still Mom and Dad, and always would be. During that time, I asked both Sharon and my parents if they would be open to meeting. And so we scheduled a dinner together. And what turned out as a very nervous meeting initially turned out to be an incredible night. I knew that I always wanted to have the opportunity, if God allowed, to adopt a child of my own. And that's something that Kelly and I talked about even as we were dating, and began praying for the right opportunity, for God's timing to adopt a child. God answered that prayer because we got a phone call in January of 2006 that would change our lives. And the next morning we were on a plane to Florida, and 2 days later we were holding a precious little baby girl. I am so thankful for Deaconess Pregnancy and Adoption. They've been a part of my life since before I was born. And now to have the incredible opportunity to serve with this amazing staff and wonderful volunteers, to see this organization continue to grow and impact thousands of lives is such a blessing. I am so grateful to be such a small part of what is taking place through Deaconess Pregnancy and Adoption.